Welcome to the CEC Report for the 3rd of July 2015. I'm Elisa Barwick, and with me today is Robert Barwick. Welcome, Robert.
Thanks, Elisa.
And on today's CEC Report, we have a special feature, Greek crisis, now ground zero of global showdown. And we're going to go straight to the situation in Greece, which is quite dramatic. Now, what we have on the ground at the moment in Greece is that obviously the banks are closed, and that is happening for a week long of business days until the referendum, which takes place this Sunday. Now, that referendum is to give the people of Greece the choice of endorsing what their government is doing in demanding debt forgiveness, demanding a better deal for the Greeks, so saying no to the ultimatum being delivered by the European Union authorities, who continue to demand continued austerity, cuts to pensions, cuts to wages, which will ruin Greece. And even the IMF reports recently have admitted that what they've offered will not change the indebted situation. Now, the Troika of the EU, the European Central Bank and the IMF have basically stated there will be no further discussions with Greece until after that referendum. And what they're basically doing is scheming to try to ensure that the referendum brings about the overthrow of the government of Alexis Tsipras.
They're trying to manipulate the outcome, including disinformation to make it sound like if the Greek people vote no, they're actually voting no to staying in Europe, and that's not true.
Yeah, exactly, to say it's a referendum on keeping in the European Union or not. So some of the black propaganda coming out is that they're putting out the line through the media that the people have turned against the government. There was a fraudulent letter, which we heard reported on the news here in Australia last night, which they never mentioned, was proven to be fraudulent. It was a letter presented by the Financial Times saying that Tsipras had capitulated to all the demands of the Troika, and that is not true, because the Greek government actually put out the correct letter, the real actual letter, and it was not to that effect.
They looked like they put out that fraudulent letter, Elisa, to fool the stock markets and to keeping them up. It was just a total fraud.
Yeah, exactly. Now, also this week, coming out of London, which is very significant, 25 members of Parliament, union leaders and other community leaders have put out a call to the Prime Minister of England demanding debt forgiveness.
Yeah, this is very important because Britain is one of the bigger members of the European Union. Of course, the City of London is the cause of all this stuff anyway, all this crisis. And these 25 MPs include some of the members of Parliament who addressed our conference here in Australia in March on the BRICS and on financial reform, and they're big advocates of financial reform. And they're saying we need debt forgiveness not just for Greece but for all countries that need it, and they say it should be funded by the speculators who caused the crisis and have benefited from the bailouts so far. So it's a very punchy, combative letter, and it means as the crisis has come to a head this week like it has, the good people are coming out of the woodwork.
Absolutely. Now, we're going to actually show a presentation here because you've just come back from Europe. Craig Isherwood, our National Secretary, has been there also, and he's now in Russia, and he was invited to address the June 29th to July 1st CIVIC BRICS Forum in Moscow. They've got a number of these forums as part of Russia heading up the BRICS this year. So Craig attended and spoke at one of the sessions, his speech was titled World War III or a Worldwide Renaissance, Why the West Must Collaborate with BRICS for the Common Aims of Mankind. So let's listen to what Craig had to say.
Thank you very much, Professor Tolleret. I'm, as I said, Craig Isherwood from Australia. I'm from the Citizens Electoral Council of Australia. We're an independent movement and a federally registered political party for the past 27 years. I founded the organisation 27 years ago, and I am very grateful to the organising committee and to Professor Tolleret personally for the opportunity to inviting me to attend this conference and the Civil BRICS Forum to address you. Australia is hardly, of course, a candidate for immediate membership in BRICS. Although our country occupies a whole continent, with a land area greater than that of India or South Africa, though not of those smaller than Russia, China or Brazil, it is inhabited by less than 24 million people. Our head of state is still the British monarch, a situation which India overcame in 1950 and South Africa in 1961. In recent decades, Australia has been used as a laboratory for destructive financial experiments such as the privatisation of public infrastructure. In the political sphere, my government has joined the sanctions, economic warfare against BRICS member Russia, while in the military area, some American and British strategists treat Australia as an unsinkable aircraft carrier for confrontation against another BRICS member, China. Yet, I am here to greet you on behalf of thousands of my fellow Australians who welcome BRICS as a crucial institution for overcoming the grave dangers now facing all mankind. Above all, what this working group's draft paper mentions as, quote, the growing level of tensions in international relations and the prospect of a big war involving major powers, BRICS is a crucial institution for building a new just world order. As you see on this slide, on March 28th and 29th of this year, our Citizens Electoral Council of Australia held an international conference entitled The World Land Bridge, Peace on Earth, Goodwill to All Men. Professor Tollerea, speaking on the power of the BRICS process, called for ways to overcome the notion that BRICS is anti-Western and to cooperate with the West. I endorse that aspiration, really realising that it implies drastic changes in US, European and also Australian politics. Therefore, I'm also very happy as well to greet you on behalf of International Schiller Institute movement, of which my organisation is affiliated, and its founders Helga Zepp-LaRouche of Germany and her husband Lyndon LaRouche, the American economist known to many in BRICS nations for his pioneering work in the science of physical economy. In October of 2012, Helga Zepp-LaRouche launched a series of conferences around the world on the need for a new paradigm to rescue humanity from the twin dangers of war and economic collapse. Citing NATO's eastward expansion, US military provocations in the Pacific, and the continuous policy of regime change in the Near and Middle East, Eastern Europe, North Africa and Central Asia, she warned that, quote, the unthinkable could occur, a war in which thermonuclear weapons are deployed, leading to the extinction of the human race. In the 3 years since then, the war danger has worsened thanks to US NATO provocations around the coup in Ukraine. Military experts have termed the current showdown more dangerous than the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 because so many East-West diplomatic channels have broken down. On the more positive side, BRICS has rapidly taken shape as a magnetic pole for a completely different policy, peace through economic development. Beginning in 2014, the Schiller Institute issued a petition entitled "The US and Europe must have the courage to reject geopolitics and collaborate with BRICS," outlining several proposals by BRICS countries, not just for themselves, but for the benefit of the people of all nations. The Schiller Institute petition concludes, quote, "We therefore call upon the US and Europe to abandon the suicidal geopolitical policies of the past, which led to the two previous world wars and are leading to a third, and to build a future for all humanity by readopting the principle of the Treaty of Westphalia, by basing foreign policy on the principle of the benefit of the other, which ended the 30 Years' War in Europe. That is the only course coherent with the true nature of man as the only created species. As patriots of our own nations and as citizens of the world, we call on our fellow citizens and leaders of our nations to have the courage to break the current cycle of escalating bestiality by accepting the generous offer to collaborate with the BRICS. Hundreds of prominent people, including from the UK, the United States and Europe, have signed the petition. The war danger is driven by the continuing and accelerating collapse of the transatlantic financial system, in which the crisis of the Greek debt is only one incident. Even the City of London financial centre mouthpiece, The Economist, admits that a far bigger crash than 2008, than the 2008 crisis lies just ahead.
Now, after the break, we'll hear the rest of what Craig had to say. Welcome back to the CEC Report, where we're discussing Greek crisis, now ground zero of global showdown. So we've just been listening to Craig Isherwood at the Civil BRICS Forum in Moscow.
And Elisa, it's worth noting that Craig was the only representative of a non-BRICS nation at that event. So this is quite a significant speech that he's given here.
And so we'll watch the second part now, in which Craig elaborates on some of the history of our organisation internationally, our role in the emergence of the BRICS, and how this can be the basis of a new world order.
For more than 50 years, and especially since the end of the Bretton Woods system and the introduction of floating currency exchange rates in 1971, Lyndon LaRouche has warned that a global financial oligarchy basing its power on monetary speculation and the looting of national economies would ultimately pursue policies of mass killing, whether by overt warfare, liberal imperialism, or population reduction through limiting nations' access to technology and higher living standards. The present financial monetary system cannot be reformed. LaRouche has often said it must be replaced. At the same time, LaRouche and the Schiller Institute have a 40-year record of promoting that replacement, starting with what must be done in the science and physical economy for all countries' national interests and the common aims of mankind. In the early 1990s, when the Berlin Wall coming down should have meant the end of the Cold War, the Schiller Institute proposed to replace confrontation with collaboration. Its European Productive Triangle Plan for Industrial Recovery and the subsequent Eurasian Land Bridge proposal became well known internationally. In 1996, Helga Zepp-LaRouche spoke at the 1996 Continental Bridge Conference in China, and our land bridge map appeared in the Russian press. I and my organisation mobilised support in Australia for the land bridge concept as shown in this 1997 issue of our newspaper. In 1998, the Schiller Institute welcomed the bold call made in New Delhi by then Prime Minister of Russia, Yevgeny Primakov, for the Eurasian Strategic Triangle Russia-India, Russia-India-China, the core of what was to become BRICS, and we mourn academician Primakov's passing last Friday. In 2014, my fellow American and European friends published an updated special report, The New Silk Road Becomes the World Land Bridge. These projects are venues for cooperation among nations in their shared interests. My movement sees extraordinary coherence between the Westphalian principle of seeking the benefit of the other and what President Xi Jinping of China calls the win-win policy. It means real changes in thinking. For example, if the Schiller Institute's 2012 program for the development of the Mediterranean Basin Great Infrastructure Projects extending the new Silk Road to all of southern Europe were to be implemented, then Greece is not a basket case, but can become the bridge between Europe and BRICS in the tradition of the ancient historical ties between great cultures such as Greece and China. I hope that the BRICS leaders at Bukhara will voice such bold ideas. I hope, and perhaps this will come from other working groups of this forum, that they will commit to greatly stepped up international efforts to achieve controlled thermonuclear fusion power, as is expressed in the optimistic ideas of several BRICS nations about mining helium-3 on the moon for use as a fuel on Earth. Fusion power can bring an end to the resource shortages and resource wars and enable mankind to solve its freshwater problems, freshwater shortage problems and green the deserts. In that way, I believe that the 21st century can be what Russian scientist Vladimir Vernadsky anticipated, the era in which the biosphere becomes the noosphere and human creativity is the most powerful geological force. I strongly support paragraph 13 in section Roman numeral 3 of the original draft recommendations, and also now in point 5 of the summary recommendations, calling for a planetary defence system. As Russian experts have noted, it is urgent to install elements of a system against the comet and asteroid danger also in the southern hemisphere. So I think that BRICS members South Africa and BRICS outreach country Argentina and my country Australia all have an important role to play in that. The strategic defence of Earth is a task through which minds can be changed also in the West, and we know from the visits by American nuclear weapons specialist Edward Teller to his counterparts at the Russia Chelyabinsk lab in the 1990s, where they discussed planetary defence. My movement is committed to inspiring people to change their minds in similarly profound ways regarding the positive potential of BRICS. The late former Prime Minister of Australia, Malcolm Fraser, who was a friend of the Citizens Electoral Council up to his recent death in March of this year, had been known as a military hardliner during the Vietnam War. Last year, in a message to the Schiller Institute's 30th anniversary conference in Germany, Mr. Fraser gave his evaluation that the economic and strategic policies of the US and NATO had failed. He wrote about a different option, quote, and that is for the most powerful Western nations to realise that there have been great changes in the world, that the strategic context has altered, that other powers such as BRICS are emerging and that the West should collaborate with them as partners to establish a more equal and more just world. Thank you.
Now, CEC has also had invitations to other BRICS and also non-BRICS nations to speak at various events. And we're literally seen as the only faction on the Australian continent that is aligning with this kind of sane faction rather than the other approach, which will lead to war. And we're going to talk about that a little bit in the next segment and how this Greek showdown is playing out. Welcome back to the CEC Report. So before the break, we were listening to Craig Isherwood speaking at a major BRICS forum in Russia. Now, prior to Craig travelling there, you were with him at an international Schiller Institute conference in Paris, France, Robbie, which was entitled Rebuilding the World in the BRICS Era, and which had the themes of creating a new economic paradigm and eradicating geopolitics, among other things. What were the highlights of that event and how do they bear on this global situation?
Well, the real highlight was, as much as anything, the timing, because the Schiller Institute hosted this conference on this continuing theme that the leader of the Schiller Institute, Helga LaRouche, has set for a number of years now on a new paradigm. The world's got to move in a new direction. But it hosted this conference as this Greek crisis is coming to a head. And as we said in the headline, the Greek crisis is ground zero of a global showdown. It's an economic showdown between the economic systems of the IMF, World Bank and Wall Street and London that dominate the world financial system now, versus what the BRICS countries are trying to show, which is that, look, countries should retain their sovereignty, governments should retain ultimate control over their economies, but countries can collaborate on economic development in a way that countries don't have to give up their sovereignties. And the economic development can be real economic development, not financial speculation like London and Wall Street specialise in. And real economic development benefits everybody, raises the living standards. The Chinese have this term win-win. And so this really is which direction's the world going to go. And the Schiller Institute conference, was all about those really important themes. And there were people at this conference that are specialists in the Greek situation, because what happens with Greece is, if depending on the outcome, and maybe not even depending on either way with the outcome of the referendum on Sunday, this could be the trigger for the meltdown, the next stage of the global financial meltdown. But behind Greece is the eastern countries, right? And the Europeans and Americans are totally freaked out that Greece may go in that direction, so it has that political strategic dimension as well. And it's a bigger issue than just the financial system, therefore. And that's why people on the London side are likening this referendum to the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand in Sarajevo that led to World War I, for crying out loud, because it does have that implication, right? So at this conference, we understood the implication of what Greece was about. And what we're saying is now is the time to push for the changes so the world can move in a different direction. And you know, you bring a forum of people together like that from all around the world. We represent Australia. There are people from all around the world where you can discuss these things that can then influence governments. And these kind of discussions do influence governments. And like we said, Craig Isherwood then went off to speak at this forum in Moscow. And I got to go back to the United Kingdom and talk to members of Parliament in the United Kingdom about these very issues.
And so this bears upon events that we have discussed in a press release we put out this week, which was entitled Australian Foreign Policy Hostage to Neocons Who Want War with China, because what you described is creating a new security architecture to parallel a new economic architecture, which is also win-win, but that's not how leading Australians see it, is it?
No, exactly. So Australians should be very alarmed by what happened this week, because this clown, who is Tony Abbott's appointment as the head of the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. His name's Michael Fawley, and what qualifies him for the job is he was Australia's ambassador to the Bush-Cheney White House when they plotted the Iraq War. And the word is plotted, the word is concocted, the word is it's deliberately lied. It wasn't a mistake. They deliberately lied to create a war, despite everything you're told. That's what they did, and he was part of that gang. They all feted him when he left, apparently. Big Condi and Cheney and Rumsfeld and whatever all came to a drink session for this guy when he left that. He was such a crucial part of Australia being involved in that illegal criminal operation for which people like John Howard and Tony Blair and George Bush would be in jail. So he's now the head of the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, and with that credibility, he gave a speech where he said that China, and bear in mind China is a country that's thousands of years old, China isn't ready to take a global leadership role. Isn't ready. Who the hell do they think they are? Now, China, of course, is already taking a global leadership role. It's just China doesn't do it along the rules that the British imperialists and their American puppets want it done. China is working through the BRICS to lead the world in a new direction, like I said, where economic relations are based on respect for each other's sovereignty, in which countries then collaborate around economic development that benefits everybody. That's the leading role that China is playing, and it's doing it.
Yeah.
They hate it, and they hate. It's not just about China. Therefore, they hate that this is a collaborative thing. The BRICS represents a collaborative approach, but these people are in charge of our government. And for the irony for Australians is, now we don't approve of this per se, Elisa, where we're a quarry economy entirely dependent on resource exports, but we are. And who are we dependent on? China. So the country upon whom we are the most dependent, our government is determined to go to war with them. And that's what it means. Whatever they say, that's where they're heading with this rubbish. So we had to expose that. And we have to remind Australians that there is a better way, and countries like China, they're not perfect, they're not immune to criticism, but they're much better in the direction they're going than Australia, the United States, the United Kingdom.
Absolutely, and you can find out more about all the subjects that we've discussed today in the Australian Alert Service, and that's all we've got time for. Thanks, Robert. Thanks for tuning into the CEC Report, and join us again next week.